The reservation at Le Bernardin was booked under a ghost alias, the perimeter secured by shadows carrying concealed firearms. Alessandro Romano, the undisputed architect of the New York syndicate, was expecting a calculated pawn, a woman sent by a desperate debtor to seal a blood-pact marriage. Instead, the terrified maître des escorted a 6-year-old girl to his secluded table. Her scuffed sneakers barely made a sound on the Persian rug. She clutched a crumpled paper napkin, looked the most dangerous man on the eastern seaboard dead in the eye, and whispered, "My mum is sick, so I came instead." In that single heartbeat, an empire built on ruthlessness was brought to its knees. The VIP dining room of Le Bernardin was usually a sanctuary for the city's elite, a place where multi-million-dollar mergers and quiet political assassinations were orchestrated over plates of yellowfin tuna and vintage Bordeaux. Tonight, it had been cleared out entirely. Alessandro Romano sat at the head of the long mahogany table, nursing a glass of bourbon. At 32, Alessandro had inherited a fractured syndicate, and, through sheer, unadulterated violence and unmatched intellect, forged it into an untouchable monolith. He was here to collect a debt. Arthur Pendleton, a corrupt state senator who had gambled away syndicate money, had offered a desperate plea deal. His estranged niece, an allegedly beautiful and compliant woman, in exchange for a temporary stay of execution. It was an archaic, insulting offer, but Alessandro had agreed to the dinner out of sheer morbid curiosity. He fully intended to send the woman away and order Pendleton's execution by dessert. His underboss, Dante, stood by the heavy oak doors, adjusting his tailored suit to better conceal the holster beneath his arm. "She's late, boss. 10 minutes. Do you want me to make the call to Pendleton's handlers?" Alessandro swirled his bourbon. "Give her 2 more minutes. If Pendleton's pawn doesn't show, we burn his estate to the ground tonight." The heavy oak doors creaked open. Dante's hand instantly ghosted toward his lapel, his eyes narrowing at the maître d', who looked as though he were walking to the guillotine. Behind the maître d', completely obscured by the man's trembling frame, was a small, shifting shape. "Mr. Romano," the maître d' stammered, his face devoid of color. Your guest has arrived." The maître d' stepped aside. Alessandro's grip on his heavy crystal glass tightened. It wasn't a woman wrapped in designer silk. It wasn't an assassin. It was a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 6. She wore a faded yellow sundress that had seen too many washes, a mismatched cardigan, and scuffed pink light-up sneakers. Her dark, curly hair was tangled in a messy braid, and she carried a battered, knock-off Barbie backpack. The silence in the room was absolute. 5 hardened Mafia enforcers stared, entirely paralyzed by the sheer absurdity of the situation. The girl stepped forward, leaving the safety of the maître d', who immediately fled the room. She walked right up to the head of the table. She had to tilt her head back severely, just to look Alessandro in the eye. She didn't flinch at the scar cutting through his left eyebrow, nor did she cower at the cold, predatory darkness in his gaze. "Are you the scary man?" she asked. Her voice was a tiny, bell-like sound in the cavernous room. Dante stepped forward, his voice a low growl. "Boss, what is this? A joke?" Alessandro raised a single, commanding finger. Dante froze, stepping back into the shadows. Alessandro slowly leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, bringing himself slightly closer to the girl's eye level. "I have been called many things," Alessandro said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that usually made grown men hyperventilate. "Who are you?" "I'm Lily," she said, clutching a crumpled, tear-stained napkin in her small hands. She took a deep breath, her little chest puffing out with manufactured bravery. "My mum is sick, so I came instead." Alessandro stared at her. Your mother? Clara, Lily said, smoothing out the napkin and placing it on the table. It was a hastily scrawled note, the handwriting shaky and frantic. The Drake Hotel, room 402, 8 p.m. Mr. Romano. Please. Uncle Arthur said if Mum didn't come eat dinner with the scary man tonight, he was going to take our house away and hurt us, Lily explained, her voice trembling slightly, though she fought to keep her tears at bay. Mum was getting dressed, but she fell down. She's really hot, like burning. She wouldn't wake up, but I know she has to be here, or the bad men will come. Lily looked at the empty chairs, then back at Alessandro. I don't eat much. Can I just sit here so Uncle Arthur doesn't hurt her? A terrifying, icy calm descended over Alessandro. Arthur Pendleton hadn't just insulted the head of the Romano family. He had threatened a sick woman and forced a child to walk into a den of wolves. The audacity was almost blinding. Dante, Alessandro said softly. The quietness of his tone made the temperature in the room plummet. Yes, boss. Call the men outside Pendleton's estate. Tell them to break his legs, both of them. Leave him alive for now. I want to ask him a few questions. Dante nodded, pulling out his encrypted phone and stepping out. Alessandro looked back at Lily. She was eyeing the basket of artisanal bread in the center of the table. Her stomach gave a loud, audible rumble. She blushed, looking down at her scuffed sneakers. Have you eaten tonight, Lily? Alessandro asked. She shook her head. I was making Mom soup, but she dropped the bowl when she fell. Alessandro stood up. He was 6'3", a towering figure of bespoke Italian wool and suppressed violence. Yet, as he walked around the table, he moved with careful, deliberate slowness so as not to startle her. He reached down and picked up a warm, buttery roll from the basket, kneeling to offer it to her. Eat this, he commanded gently. Lily took it with both hands, taking a massive bite, her eyes widening at the taste. Where do you live, Lily? Alessandro asked. The Bronx, she mumbled around a mouthful of bread, in the big brick building next to the loud trains. Your mother is there right now. Alone? Lily nodded, a tear finally escaping and tracking through the flour dust on her cheek. I locked the door like she taught me. I took the subway. The nice lady at the ticket booth helped me. Alessandro stood, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. A 6-year-old had navigated the New York subway system at night to face a Mafia boss because a politician wanted to save his own skin. Cancel the rest of the courses, Alessandro ordered the room at large. Get the cars out front, now. He looked down at the little girl who was currently demolishing a $20 piece of bread. Come, Lily. We are going to go get your mother. The heavily armored Maybach glided silently through the rain-slicked streets of New York. The transition from the glittering opulence of Manhattan to the gritty, shadow-drenched avenues of the Bronx was stark. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was surreal. Alessandro Romano sat in the plush leather seat, his posture rigid, scrolling through a tablet. Across from him, Lily was fast asleep, curled up into a tiny ball, clutching a massive cashmere blanket Dante had procured from the trunk. Boss, Silas, the syndicate's chief intelligence officer, spoke through the partition intercom. I ran the background check you asked for. The mother is Clara Hayes, 26 years old, registered nurse at St. Jude's. No criminal record, clean as a whistle. And her connection to Arthur Pendleton? Alessandro asked, his eyes never leaving the tablet. Pendleton is her uncle by marriage, her father's brother. Her father passed away 3 years ago, left her with a mountain of medical debt. Pendleton bought the debt from the creditors 6 months ago. Since then, he's been squeezing her dry. He forced her into this dinner, threatening to foreclose on her apartment, and have Child Protective Services take the girl. Alessandro's finger tapped rhythmically against the edge of the tablet. A nurse. A civilian. Pendleton had tried to pay a $10 million syndicate debt with a terrified, innocent single mother. "We are 2 minutes out, boss," the driver announced. The Maybach pulled up to a decaying, 5-story brick building. The streetlights flickered, casting long, menacing shadows across the graffiti-stained walls. The sound of the elevated train rattling overhead was deafening. This was not a place for a child. It wasn't a place for anyone. Alessandro stepped out of the car, adjusting his coat against the chill. "Dante, stay here with the girl. Lock the doors." "You want me to send a team in first, boss?" one of the guards asked. "No, I'm going in." Alessandro walked into the building, 2 of his most lethal enforcers flanking him. The air inside smelled of stale cigarettes, boiling cabbage, and damp mildew. They bypassed the broken elevator and climbed 3 flights of stairs in silence. They reached apartment 3B. The door was flimsy, the paint peeling. "Stand back," Alessandro muttered to his men. He lifted his foot and kicked the door right next to the lock. The cheap wood splintered instantly, and the door flew open, hitting the interior wall with a loud bang. Alessandro stepped inside, his hand resting on the grip of his pistol. The apartment was tiny, barely larger than his walk-in closet at the estate, but it was immaculately clean. Books were stacked neatly in corners. Cheap, framed crayon drawings decorated the peeling wallpaper. "Search the rooms," he ordered. He walked toward the only bedroom. The door was ajar. Pushing it open, the first thing he noticed was the heat. A cheap space heater was blasting in the corner. Then he saw her. Clara Hayes was crumpled on the floor near a small, unmade bed. She was dressed in a simple, elegant black dress, clearly bought for the dinner. But the zipper in the back was only half pulled up. Her blonde hair was plastered to her forehead with sweat, her face pale as snow save for the unnatural, feverish flush on her cheeks. Next to her was a shattered ceramic bowl and a puddle of cold chicken broth. Alessandro knelt beside her. He pressed 2 fingers to the side of her neck. Her pulse was erratic, racing like a trapped bird. Her skin was burning up. "Clara," he said, his voice unusually soft. She didn't stir. Her breathing was shallow, a wet, rattling sound echoing in her chest. "Boss," one of the enforcers said from the doorway. "Ambulance?" "No," Alessandro said instantly. "Pendleton has cops and EMS in this borough on his payroll. If she goes to a public hospital, he'll know, and he might try to finish the job to cover his tracks." Alessandro slid one arm under Clara's knees and the other behind her back, lifting her effortlessly. She weighed next to nothing. He could feel her ribs through the fabric of the dress. A strange, unfamiliar spike of rage pierced through his chest. Not the cold, calculated anger of a mob boss, but something fiercely protective. "Call Dr. Costa," Alessandro barked as he carried her out of the apartment. "Tell him to prep the ICU suite at the compound. Tell him we have a civilian with severe pneumonia and acute exhaustion." "The compound, boss?" the enforcer asked, hesitating. The Romano compound was an impenetrable fortress in upstate New York. Civilians never went there. People who went to the compound usually did so in the trunk of a car and never left. "Did I stutter?" Alessandro snarled. "No, boss. Right away." Alessandro carried Clara down the stairs and out into the cold night air. When Dante saw them emerge, he immediately opened the rear door of the Maybach. Alessandro slid inside, keeping Clara in his arms, her head resting against his chest. Lily stirred in the corner, rubbing her eyes. When she saw her mother, she let out a small gasp. "Mommy!" "She is safe, Lily," Alessandro said, his voice projecting a bizarre, comforting authority. "She is just sleeping. We are taking her to a very good doctor." Lily crawled across the seat and placed her small hand on her mother's knee. She looked up at Alessandro, her large, innocent eyes searching his face. "Are you taking us to your castle, Mr. Scary Man?" Alessandro looked down at the unconscious woman in his arms, feeling the fragile beat of her heart against his own. "Something like that, Piccola. Something like that." Clara awoke to the steady, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. For a long moment, she kept her eyes closed, floating in a haze of strong painkillers and soft, high-thread count sheets. The last thing she remembered was the suffocating heat in her apartment, trying to zip up the cheap black dress her uncle had sent her, and the terrifying knowledge that if she didn't get to Le Bernardin, Arthur would follow through on his threats. She remembered the world tilting, the floor rushing up to meet her, and the devastating realization that she was failing Lily. Lily. Clara's eyes snapped open. Panic hit her like a physical blow. She tried to sit up, but a sharp ache in her chest forced her back down with a gasp. She wasn't in her apartment. She wasn't in a sterile, crowded Bronx hospital ward either. She was in a massive room that looked like a suite at the Waldorf Astoria, only it was outfitted with state-of-the-art medical equipment. Heavy velvet curtains were drawn over tall windows, and the walls were painted a soothing, dark slate. An IV line was taped to the back of her hand, pumping clear fluid into her veins. "Careful. Dr. Costa said your lungs are heavily inflamed. Moving too fast will trigger a coughing fit." The voice came from the shadows in the corner of the room. It was deep, textured like gravel and expensive whiskey. Clara froze. She turned her head slowly. Sitting in a leather wingback chair was a man. He was dressed immaculately in a dark, tailored suit with no tie, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone. His face was a study in harsh angles, sharp jaw, high cheekbones, and a faint silver scar cutting through his left eyebrow. His eyes were dark, calculating, and fixed entirely on her. He looked exactly like the monster Arthur had described. "Where is my daughter?" Clara rasped, her voice sounding like dry leaves. She ignored the pain in her chest and pushed herself up onto her elbows. "Where is Lily?" Alessandro stood up. He moved with the quiet grace of a predator. He walked over to the bedside table and poured a glass of water from a crystal pitcher. "Your daughter is currently in the kitchen, eating her 3rd serving of homemade gelato under the supervision of my head of security, who is remarkably bad at saying no to her," Alessandro said, offering her the glass. Clara stared at the glass, then at him. She didn't take it. "Who are you?" Alessandro lowered the glass, placing it on the nightstand. "My name is Alessandro Romano. We were supposed to have dinner 2 nights ago." 2 nights ago? Clara's mind raced. She had been unconscious for 2 days. The man standing before her was the head of the Romano crime family. The man Arthur had sold her to. I missed the dinner," Clara stammered, terror seizing her throat. "Arthur said, he said if I didn't show up, you would—" "Kill him?" Alessandro finished for her. "I still might, but not because you missed dinner." Alessandro pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down. He didn't loom over her, but his presence was overwhelming. He took up all the oxygen in the room. "Your daughter," Alessandro began, steepling his fingers, "is a very resourceful child. When you collapsed, she took it upon herself to navigate the city, walk past 5 armed guards, and deliver your apologies to me in person." Clara's blood ran cold. "Lily went to the restaurant. To you?" "She walked right up to me and told me her mother was sick, so she came instead." A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched the corner of Alessandro's mouth. "She has more courage than half the men in my syndicate." Clara dropped her face into her hands, a choked sob escaping her lips. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. Please, Mr. Romano, I know Arthur owes you money. I know he offered me to you to pay it off. But I have nothing. I'm a nurse. I'm broke. Please just let us go. I'll work off his debt. I'll give you a percentage of every paycheck for the rest of my life. Just, please don't hurt my daughter." Alessandro's expression darkened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Look at me, Clara," he commanded softly. It wasn't a shout, but the sheer weight of his voice forced her to drop her hands and meet his gaze. "Arthur Pendleton owes me $12 million, Alessandro said slowly, letting the magnitude of the number sink in. Clara's breath hitched. 12 million. She couldn't pay that off in 10 lifetimes. He tried to pay a $12 million syndicate debt with a 26-year-old single mother, Alessandro continued, his eyes locked onto hers. "Do I look like a man who traffics in human collateral to settle casino markers?" Clara swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. "Arthur said you agreed." "I agreed to meet his representative to see exactly how low the senator was willing to sink before I tore his empire apart. I expected an assassin. I expected a spy." Alessandro leaned forward slightly. "I did not expect a sick woman and a child who had to pawn her toys to buy a subway ticket." Clara flinched. She hadn't known Lily pawned anything. The shame burned hot in her chest. "So what happens now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Am I your prisoner?" "You are my guest," Alessandro corrected smoothly. "You are in the medical wing of my private estate. Dr. Costa has treated your pneumonia. You are severely malnourished and exhausted. You will stay here until you are fully recovered." "I can't stay here," Clara protested, panic rising again. "I have a job. I have shifts at St. Jude's. If I don't show up, they'll fire me, and then we'll truly be on the streets." "You no longer work at St. Jude's." Clara's eyes widened. "What? You can't do that." "I already did," Alessandro said calmly. "I bought St. Jude's yesterday morning. You are currently on indefinite, paid administrative leave." Clara stared at him, entirely speechless. The absolute casualness with which he spoke about buying a major metropolitan hospital was terrifying. It highlighted the impossible chasm between her world of scraping by and his world of absolute power. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Men like you don't do favors. What do you want from me?" Alessandro stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. He looked down at her, his dark eyes tracing the delicate lines of her face. For the first time in his life, Alessandro Romano was doing something entirely illogical. He had brought a civilian, a liability, into his sanctuary. He had started a war with a state senator over a woman he had never met. "When your daughter walked into my dining room, she looked me in the eye and demanded I spare her mother," Alessandro said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate timbre. "In my world, Clara, loyalty and bravery like that are rarer than diamonds. Arthur Pendleton threw you to the wolves to save himself." Alessandro stepped closer to the bed. "I am the wolf," he said softly, "and I have decided that I am keeping you." Before Clara could process the terrifying, possessive weight of his words, the heavy oak door of the medical suite swung open. "Mommy!" Lily burst into the room, a massive smear of chocolate gelato on her cheek, wearing a ridiculously oversized black t-shirt that clearly belonged to one of the guards. She scrambled up onto the bed, mindful of the wires, and threw her arms around Clara's neck. Clara buried her face in her daughter's hair, tears finally spilling over. "Lily. Oh, my sweet girl." Alessandro watched them from the foot of the bed. The cold, empty hollow in his chest, a void he had carried since he took over the syndicate, suddenly felt dangerous, as if something violently protective was waking up inside it. Arthur Pendleton had no idea what he had done. He hadn't just insulted the boss of the syndicate. He had handed Alessandro Romano the only two things in the world he suddenly realized he was willing to burn the entire city to the ground to protect. "Rest, Clara," Alessandro said, turning toward the door. "We have much to discuss tomorrow." The Romano compound was not a house. It was a modern fortress masquerading as an architectural marvel. Nestled deep in the Adirondack Mountains, the estate was surrounded by thousands of acres of private, heavily monitored forest. Floor-to-ceiling bulletproof glass offered panoramic views of a pristine, icy lake, while the interior was a masterclass in minimalist wealth, dark Italian marble, vaulted ceilings, and a silence so profound it felt heavy. 3 days after arriving, the woman formerly known as Clara sat in the sprawling library, wrapped in a thick cashmere shawl. The pneumonia had broken, leaving her weak but lucid. The heavy oak doors parted, and Alessandro walked in. He wore a charcoal suit, impeccably tailored, moving with that same quiet, terrifying grace. He carried a thick manila folder and a silver tray with 2 cups of espresso. "You are looking better," Alessandro noted, his baritone voice echoing softly in the cavernous room. He set the tray down on the low table between them. "I am breathing," she replied, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. "Which is more than I expected when I woke up in a Mafia kingpin's house." Alessandro's lips twitched in a shadow of a smile. He sat opposite her, leaning back into the leather armchair. "I have news regarding your uncle. But first, a matter of logistics." He picked up the manila folder and slid it across the glass table. "Open it." She hesitated, then reached out with trembling fingers. Inside lay a pristine United States passport, a New York State driver's license, a birth certificate, and a registered nursing license. She stared at the photo. It was her face, captured from the hospital bed by a discreet camera, but the name printed beside it was foreign. "Nora Blake?" she asked, looking up in confusion. "As of 6 o'clock this morning, Clara Hayes no longer exists," Alessandro stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Arthur Pendleton has realized you are missing. He is currently utilizing his connections within the NYPD to file a missing persons report, likely to claim you fled to avoid his debt collectors. If you are found as Clara Hayes, he has the legal leverage to force you back into his custody or seize your daughter." Nora's breath hitched. "So, I am dead." An electrical fire ravaged a dilapidated apartment building in the Bronx last night. Tragically, a female resident and her child were caught in the blaze. The dental records, which my people have carefully managed, will confirm the identities by tomorrow. Alessandro took a slow sip of his espresso. "You are Nora Blake now. Your daughter is Lily Blake. It is the only way to sever Arthur's legal ties to you while we dismantle him." Nora stared at the documents. The sheer, terrifying power this man wielded to erase a human life and forge a new one overnight was staggering. "Thank you," Nora whispered, tracing the raised lettering on the passport. It felt like a betrayal to abandon her name, but looking out the window at Lily, who was currently outside in the snow, gleefully throwing a snowball at a terrifying 6'4" enforcer named Bruno, she knew it was necessary. "Do not thank me yet, Nora," Alessandro said, testing her new name on his tongue. It sounded intimate, almost dangerous, coming from him. "Because the debt Arthur claimed you owed is a fabrication." Nora frowned, pulling her eyes away from the window. "What do you mean?" "My father's hospital bills were paid in full by a charity organization 2 years ago," Alessandro interrupted. He pulled a secondary, thicker file from his briefcase. It bore the logo of Kroll, a premier, real-world corporate intelligence and risk consulting firm. My intelligence network dug into Arthur's finances. He didn't sell you to me to settle a $12 million debt. He sold you to me because he needed you to disappear permanently. Alessandro opened the Kroll dossier, revealing a labyrinth of shell companies and offshore trusts. Your late father, Jonathan, was a quiet man, but a brilliant investor, Alessandro explained, his dark eyes fixed on hers. 20 years ago, he purchased a derelict warehouse district on the west side. Today, that land is directly adjacent to the Hudson Yards expansion project. It is worth roughly $400 million. Nora's jaw dropped. The room spun slightly. 400 million? We lived paycheck to paycheck. He never told me. He put it in a blind trust to protect you. The trust was set to mature and to transfer into your name on your 27th birthday. Alessandro tapped the paper, which is exactly 3 weeks from now. If you are dead or legally incapacitated, the trust defaults to your father's next of kin, Senator Arthur Pendleton. The pieces fell into place with a sickening, violent crash. Arthur hadn't been punishing her. He had been orchestrating her murder. He sent her to the city's most ruthless syndicate boss, knowing Alessandro's reputation for executing those who insulted him. Arthur expected Alessandro to kill her for the insult of sending a substitute, neatly keeping the senator's own hands clean. He wanted you to kill me, Nora breathed, the horror choking her. Yes, Alessandro said softly. The temperature in the library plummeted, the air crackling with his suppressed rage. He intended to use my family as his personal hitmen, steal your inheritance, and leave your daughter to the foster system. Nora closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. The betrayal was absolute. Her own blood had sold her out for glass and steel in Manhattan. Suddenly, she felt a warm, calloused hand wrap gently around hers. She opened her eyes to see Alessandro leaning forward, his thumb lightly brushing the tear from her skin. The gesture was so tender, so completely at odds with the violent world he commanded, that it made her heart stutter. He severely miscalculated, Alessandro promised, his voice a lethal, vibrating vow. He thought you were a pawn. He did not know you had the courage to walk into the lion's den, and he certainly did not know that the lion would decide to keep you. Arthur Pendleton paced the length of his private office in the New York State Capitol in Albany. The mahogany-paneled room, usually a symbol of his untouchable status, felt like a prison. What do you mean she isn't in the morgue? Arthur practically shrieked into his encrypted phone. On the other end of the line, NYPD Deputy Commissioner Thomas Sullivan sighed. Senator, the fire in the Bronx was a total burnout. We found remains, but the dental records were processed this morning. It's a match. Clara Hayes and the girl are dead. No! Arthur slammed his fist onto his desk, shattering a crystal paperweight. Alessandro Romano doesn't use fire. He puts a bullet in the back of the head and drops the body in the Atlantic. If there was a fire, it means Romano is covering his tracks. He took her. Senator, if Romano took her, she's gone. You should be happy. You get the trust. You idiot, Arthur hissed, spit flying from his lips. If Romano has her alive, he'll figure out who she really is. He has accountants who make Wall Street look like kindergarteners. If he finds out about the Hudson Yards Trust, he won't just kill me. He will dismantle my entire legacy, piece by piece. Arthur's chest heaved as he stared out at the Albany skyline. He had to act. He had to force Romano's hand before the Mafia boss could consolidate his power over Nora. Sullivan, Arthur growled. Assemble a tactical strike team. Off the books. I have reliable intelligence that a kidnapped woman and child are being held at the Romano estate in the Adirondacks. I want a raid." "Are you out of your mind?" Sullivan choked. "Raid the Romano compound. Half my precinct will end up in pine boxes. Do it, or I release the unredacted files on your offshore Cayman accounts to the FBI." Arthur threatened coldly. "Bring her back. Dead in the crossfire is preferable." 200 miles away, the Romano estate was cloaked in the quiet stillness of dusk. Nora stood on the massive wraparound terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in bruised shades of purple and gold. She wore a heavy wool coat over her silk loungewear, breathing in the crisp mountain air. She felt different. The terrified, desperate nurse from the Bronx was fading, replaced by a woman forged in the fires of a massive betrayal. She heard the heavy slide of the terrace door. Alessandro stepped out, carrying 2 glasses of deep red Barolo. "You shouldn't be out here in the cold," he said, handing her a glass. "I needed to breathe," Nora replied, taking a sip. The wine was exceptional, tasting of dark cherries and smoke. She looked up at him. Without the tailored suit jackets, wearing just a black turtleneck that clung to his broad shoulders, he looked less like a corporate CEO and more like the dangerous street fighter he had been in his youth. "You are adapting quickly, Nora," Alessandro observed, resting his forearms on the stone balustrade beside her. "When you realize the world is run by monsters, you have 2 choices," Nora said, her voice devoid of its previous tremor. "You can let them eat you, or you can learn to bite back. I have Lily to protect. I am done being prey." Alessandro turned his head, his dark eyes studying her profile. The fierce, unyielding light in her eyes sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated possessiveness through his veins. He had spent his life surrounded by women who feared him or wanted his money. Nora wanted neither. She just wanted her daughter's safety, and she was willing to stand toe-to-toe with the devil to get it. "Arthur will not stop," Alessandro warned softly. "He is backed into a corner. A desperate politician is more dangerous than a rival boss." "I know," Nora said. She turned to face him, the proximity suddenly making the air between them feel electric. "What is our next move?" "Our next move." The inclusive pronoun did something strange to Alessandro's chest. Before he could answer, a shrill, high-pitched alarm shattered the twilight. The ambient lighting on the terrace instantly switched from warm yellow to stark, tactical red. The heavy steel shutters over the compound's windows began to automatically slam shut, locking into place with deafening metallic thuds. The door to the terrace burst open. Dante stood there, an assault rifle already slung across his chest. "Boss, we have a massive breach at the outer perimeter," Dante reported, his voice tight. "No syndicate colors. It's a heavily militarized tactical unit. Unmarked black SUVs. They are breaching the main gate." Alessandro's demeanor shifted instantly. The protective gentleness vanished, replaced entirely by the cold, calculating apex predator of the New York underworld. "Arthur sent a dirty hit squad," Alessandro concluded instantly. He grabbed Nora's arm, his grip firm but careful not to bruise, and pulled her inside the fortified house. "Get Lily," he barked at Dante. "Take them to the subterranean panic room. Seal the blast doors." "No!" Nora planted her feet, resisting his pull. "I am not hiding in a hole while you fight a war for me." "Nora, this is not a negotiation," Alessandro commanded, his eyes blazing. "They are here to put a bullet in you to secure Arthur's inheritance. You will go with Dante." "You said we were partners in this," Nora shot back, her chin raised defiantly. "If Arthur sent cops, and they find a Mafia boss hiding a dead woman, they will shoot you and claim it was a rescue gone wrong." I need to be seen. I need to be the one to talk to them." Alessandro stared at her, genuinely stunned by her tactical reasoning. She was entirely correct. If Sullivan's men breached the house and found a shootout, they would massacre everyone and claim immunity. But if a living, breathing civilian stood between them and their target, it complicated the political optics entirely. The sound of distant gunfire echoed through the valley. The strike team had engaged the outer guards. "Boss," Dante urged, looking between them. Alessandro made a split-second decision. He looked at Nora, his expression a mix of awe and dark promise. "If you step into the line of fire, I will burn Albany to the ground." "I don't intend to get shot," Nora said coldly. "I intend to ruin my uncle." Alessandro nodded. "Dante, secure Lily in the vault. Do not let anyone near her." Dante sprinted down the hallway. Alessandro turned back to Nora, pulling a sleek, silver semi-automatic pistol from his holster. He checked the chamber and handed it to her. "Do you know how to use this?" Nora took the heavy weapon, her hands remarkably steady. "My father took me to the range every Sunday before he got sick. I know how to aim." "Good," Alessandro said, a dark, thrilled smile spreading across his face. "Let's go welcome the senator's dogs." The perimeter of the Romano estate was a masterpiece of lethal engineering, but Deputy Commissioner Sullivan's tactical unit had brought military-grade breaching charges. The iron gates surrounding the compound's access road blew open with a concussive roar that shook the snow from the pine trees. 3 unmarked, heavily up-armored SUVs tore through the smoke, their tires chewing up the manicured gravel driveway. Inside the grand foyer, Alessandro Romano stood perfectly still. The ambient tactical red lighting cast harsh, demonic shadows across his face. He checked the magazine of his customized Sig Sauer, his eyes completely dead. This was the man who had brought the 5 families of New York to heel. He did not feel fear. He only felt the cold, familiar arithmetic of war. "Hold your fire until they exit the vehicles," Alessandro instructed his earpiece, communicating with the dozen snipers hidden in the estate's upper architecture. Nora stood 2 paces behind him. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her grip on the silver semi-automatic remained unwavering. She could hear Lily's distant, muffled voice from the subterranean vault below, safe behind 3 feet of reinforced steel. That sound was all the anchor Nora needed. "Open the front doors," Nora said, her voice cutting through the tense silence of the foyer. Alessandro turned, his sharp gaze locking onto her. "Nora, if they are on Pendleton's payroll, they will not ask questions. They will shoot center mass." "They are NYPD, Alessandro," Nora countered, stepping up beside him. "They are corrupt, but they are not a cartel. They operate under the illusion of law. If they find a Mafia boss barricaded with guns, they have authorization to kill. If they find an unarmed, living woman standing in the open, executing her becomes murder in the 1st degree with dozens of witnesses. Open the doors." Alessandro stared at her, the fierce, unyielding intellect in her eyes mesmerizing him. She was utilizing his own tactical environment against the enemy. He gave a sharp nod to the men flanking the entrance. The massive double door swung open, letting in a blast of freezing Adirondack wind. Outside, 15 heavily armed tactical officers had fanned out behind their engine blocks, laser sights cutting through the falling snow, all aimed directly at the entrance. "NYPD, drop your weapons and step out with your hands in the air," the tactical commander roared through a bullhorn. Alessandro stepped out onto the floodlit portico, his hands empty, raised to shoulder height. He moved with a terrifying, deliberate calm. A chorus of laser sights immediately painted his chest. "Commander," Alessandro called out, his baritone voice easily carrying over the idling engines. You are trespassing on private property without a federally sanctioned warrant. We have credible intelligence of a kidnapping hostage situation. Romano! Where is the woman? The commander shouted back, keeping his rifle trained on Alessandro's head. I am right here. The tactical unit shifted slightly as Nora stepped out from the shadows of the foyer. She wore no armor, no tactical gear, just the heavy wool coat draped over her shoulders. She held her hands up, the silver pistol left behind on a console table inside. She walked directly to the edge of the stairs, stepping in front of Alessandro. If they fired now, they had to shoot her first. Alessandro's jaw clenched, his entire body tight as a coiled spring, ready to pull her down at the first twitch of a trigger finger. Stand down! I am the woman you are looking for, Nora announced, her voice ringing clear and steady in the frigid air. My name is Nora Blake. I am here of my own free will. I am not a hostage. The commander lowered his bullhorn, visibly confused. Ma'am, we have a confirmed casualty report. A mother and daughter died in a fire in the Bronx tonight. Senator Pendleton ordered this raid to recover your remains and apprehend your kidnapper. Senator Pendleton orchestrated an assassination attempt on my life. Nora shot back, taking another step down the stairs. He hired arsonists to burn my apartment to secure his claim on a $400 million blind trust established by my late father. A trust that matures in 3 weeks. He used you. He sent the NYPD to do his dirty work because he couldn't afford to leave a paper trail. A heavy, uneasy silence fell over the courtyard. The tactical officers exchanged uncertain glances. This was not the narrative they had been fed. That's a severe allegation, ma'am, the commander said, his weapon dipping slightly. I have orders directly from Deputy Commissioner Sullivan. And I have the private investigators from Black Cube and forensic accountants from FTI Consulting currently uploading the senator's offshore banking transfers to the Southern District of New York, Alessandro interjected smoothly. He pulled a sleek encrypted tablet from his inner coat pocket and tossed it down the snowy steps. It landed at the commander's boots. Look at the screen, Commander. That is a live feed of Arthur Pendleton authorizing a $2 million wire transfer to a shell company owned by Thomas Sullivan. You are not conducting a rescue. You are executing a hit. The commander cautiously picked up the tablet. The screen displayed damning, undeniable financial ledgers, authenticated by top-tier private intelligence firms. The realization hit the officer like a physical blow. He was risking his men's lives and their pensions for a politician's greed. The commander looked up at Nora, standing resolute and entirely alive in the snow, and then at Alessandro Romano, who was currently flanked by shadows that the commander knew were heavily armed syndicate snipers. "Lower your weapons!" the commander barked to his men. The laser sights vanished from Alessandro's chest. The commander dropped the tablet onto the snow. "Mr. Romano, ma'am, it appears we were given faulty intelligence. We will be vacating the premises." Nora didn't exhale until the last SUV reversed out of the shattered gates and disappeared down the mountain road. Her knees suddenly felt like water. She swayed, the adrenaline leaving her system in a rushing tide. Before she could fall, Alessandro's arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against his chest. He was solid, warm, and grounded. "You," Alessandro murmured, his lips brushing against her temple, his voice thick with a dangerous, intoxicating blend of awe and possessiveness, "are the most terrifying creature I have ever met." Nora looked up at him, a breathless, triumphant smile breaking across her face. "I told you, I am done being prey. Now, we go after Arthur." 2 weeks later, the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan was dripping with crystal, champagne, and political elite. Senator Arthur Pendleton was the man of the hour, hosting a multi-million-dollar fundraiser for his upcoming gubernatorial campaign. He was radiant, shaking hands, kissing cheeks, and silently celebrating the fact that his niece's tragic death had officially cleared the way for his absolute financial supremacy. He stood at the podium, adjusting the microphone, the flashbulbs of the press reflecting off his perfect porcelain veneers. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is about the future of New York," Arthur began, his voice booming with practiced charisma. "It is about building a legacy of integrity, of strength, and of—" The heavy mahogany doors at the back of the ballroom did not just open. They were violently thrust apart by 4 men in tailored black suits. The murmurs of the elite crowd died instantly. Walking through the center aisle, parting the sea of billionaires and politicians like a blade through silk, was Alessandro Romano. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo, looking every inch the ruthless, untouchable king of the city's shadows. But it was the woman on his arm who made Arthur Pendleton's blood turn to ice in his veins. Nora wore a floor-length gown of liquid silver, her posture immaculate, her gaze locked dead onto Arthur. She was no longer the exhausted, terrified nurse he had threatened in a cramped Bronx apartment. She was a queen, wrapped in the protective, terrifying aura of the Romano Empire. "What is the meaning of this?" Arthur sputtered into the microphone, his face draining of all color. "Security! Remove these people!" The private hotel security guards took one look at Alessandro's enforcers and wisely decided to stare at the ceiling. Nora released Alessandro's arm and walked up the steps to the stage. She bypassed Arthur entirely and stepped up to the secondary microphone. "Good evening," Nora said, her voice echoing perfectly through the silent ballroom. "For those who do not know me, my name is Nora Blake. My father was the founder of the Jonathan Trust, the primary landowner of the new Hudson Yards development." The room erupted into shocked whispers. The Hudson Yards Trust was the most lucrative, secretive real estate holding in the city. For the past 6 months, Senator Pendleton has been utilizing his political influence to bury my existence, attempting to orchestrate my death to seize that trust for his campaign. Nora continued, pulling a thick stack of legal documents from a sleek clutch purse. "Tonight I turned 27. The trust has officially matured and transferred to my name, and my first act as the sole proprietor of the estate is to terminate the lease on the building that houses the senator's campaign headquarters." Arthur lunged forward, his political mask entirely shattered. "You lying bitch! You're dead! You're supposed to be dead!" Before Arthur could reach her, Alessandro was there. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't need to. He simply caught Arthur by the throat, his massive hand effortlessly lifting the politician onto his toes. "You talk to my partner with respect, Senator," Alessandro whispered, his voice low enough for only Arthur to hear, cold and absolute. "Or I will show this room exactly why my family rules this city." Alessandro dropped him. Arthur collapsed to the stage floor, gasping for air, his custom suit wrinkled and pathetic. "Furthermore," Nora announced to the stunned crowd and the flashing cameras of the press, "the partners at Cravath, Swain and Moore have filed a massive civil RICO lawsuit against Mr. Pendleton, alongside a criminal referral to the FBI regarding his illegal use of NYPD tactical units for personal assassinations. The authorities are waiting in the lobby." Arthur looked up, utterly broken, his political and financial life entirely incinerated in less than 3 minutes. He had underestimated a mother's desperation, and it had cost him the world. Nora looked down at him, feeling no pity, only a profound, cleansing relief. Her daughter would never have to run again. She turned and walked back down the stairs. Alessandro offered her his arm, his dark eyes shining with an intense, burning pride. "Shall we go home, Nora?" Alessandro asked, leading her toward the exit, as the FBI agents stormed the stage to apprehend the ruined senator. "Yes," Nora smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "Lily wants us to watch a movie tonight, and you promised her you would build the Pillow Fort." "A Don of the Syndicate must always keep his promises," Alessandro replied smoothly, the corners of his mouth lifting into a rare, genuine smile. They walked out into the crisp New York night, leaving the ashes of their enemies behind them. The Empire had a new king, but more importantly, it had a queen who knew exactly how to rule the dark.